Gemini has been misunderstood for years. Labeled as inconsistent, indecisive, two-faced, emotionally unreliable. People say Gemini changes too fast, talks too much, feels too little, or never chooses a side. But what if none of that is true? What if Gemini is not confused at all, but emotionally overloaded? What if what looks like inconsistency is actually a mind and heart processing too much at once? Gemini is ruled by movement of thoughts, conversations, ideas, perspectives. Their mind never stops. And when your internal world is constantly active, adapting, absorbing, and analyzing, it doesn't look stable from the outside. It looks chaotic. But chaos and overload are not the same thing. Gemini feels everything. The difference is that they feel intellectually first. They process emotion through thought. They dissect it, question it, reinterpret it, replay it. By the time Gemini reacts, they have already lived through 10 different versions of that emotion internally. This makes them appear detached or inconsistent, when in reality, they are simply overwhelmed by the sheer amount of input their mind receives. Imagine trying to hold 5 conversations inside your head, while also navigating real-world expectations. That is the Gemini experience. It is not confusion. It is overstimulation. Because Gemini adapts quickly, people assume they don't care deeply. But adaptability is often a survival mechanism. Gemini learned early that flexibility prevents rejection. If they can adjust to any environment, any personality, any emotional tone, they reduce the risk of being excluded. So they become versatile. They become socially intelligent. They become the person who can talk to anyone about anything. But beneath that skill lies exhaustion. Constantly adjusting to others means rarely resting in your own emotional truth. Gemini becomes fluent in everyone else's language, but sometimes forgets how to speak their own. In relationships, this emotional overload shows up in subtle ways. Gemini falls in love with connection first. The conversation, the mental spark, the exchange of ideas. They crave stimulation because it keeps their mind focused and engaged. But once emotional depth enters the picture, something shifts. It's not that Gemini fears intimacy. It's that intimacy requires slowing down. And slowing down means facing emotions without distraction. When conversations fade into silence, when there's no topic to analyze or joke to deflect with, Gemini feels exposed. Silence amplifies their internal noise. And that noise can be overwhelming. So they talk, they joke, they shift topics. They intellectualize feelings instead of sitting inside them. Not because they are shallow, but because sitting inside emotion without analyzing it feels like drowning. Gemini doesn't lack depth. They lack emotional stillness. And the world often mistakes movement for avoidance. But movement for Gemini is regulation. Thinking is breathing. Words are grounding. Communication is control. One of Gemini's greatest hidden struggles is decision fatigue. When you can see multiple sides of every situation, choosing one feels like losing the others. Gemini understands perspectives deeply. They empathize easily because they can mentally place themselves in opposing viewpoints. This makes them diplomatic, insightful, and fair, but it also makes them anxious. Every decision carries the weight of alternate possibilities. Every choice feels like closing a door on another truth. So when Gemini hesitates, it isn't indecision. It's the burden of awareness. Emotionally, Gemini carries more than they reveal. Because they appear lighthearted and quick-witted, people rarely check in on their deeper feelings. Gemini becomes the emotional translator for others, the listener, the mediator. They absorb stories, problems, secrets. They carry conversations long after they end. And over time, this accumulation becomes heavy. But Gemini struggles to ask for emotional support because they are used to being the one who understands, not the one who needs understanding. The stereotype of Gemini being two-faced comes from their dual processing nature. They can feel hurt and still act okay. They can love deeply and still need space. They can be certain one day and uncertain the next, not because they lied, but because new information reshaped their internal landscape. Gemini evolves quickly. Their emotional world is fluid, and fluidity is often misread as inconsistency by those who prefer rigidity. But growth looks unstable when viewed from outside. The moment people truly fall for Gemini is when the performance drops, when the jokes pause, when the rapid-fire thoughts slow just enough for vulnerability to slip through. Gemini doesn't open up dramatically. They reveal themselves in fragments. A serious tone mid-conversation, a quiet confession after laughter, a moment of honesty that feels almost accidental. That is when their emotional depth becomes undeniable. And those who notice this shift realize something powerful. Gemini was never shallow. They were protecting themselves from overload. Gemini's healing begins when they stop trying to process emotions alone. When they realize they don't have to intellectualize every feeling before expressing it. When they allow themselves to say, "I don't fully understand what I'm feeling yet, but I need space to feel it." Emotional clarity doesn't always come before vulnerability. Sometimes it comes because of it. Gemini must learn that confusion is not failure, and that slowing down does not erase their identity. Being emotionally overloaded means your system is working constantly. It means your mind is brilliant but tired. It means your heart is sensitive but guarded by thought. Gemini doesn't need to become more consistent to be worthy of love. They need to feel safe enough to be complex. They need partners and friends who understand that shifting moods are not manipulation, they are processing. That silence doesn't mean withdrawal, it means recalibration. That space is not rejection, it is recovery. Gemini is not confused. Gemini is layered. Gemini is processing multiple realities at once. Gemini is carrying conversations, perspectives, and emotional data most people never notice. And beneath the noise, beneath the movement, beneath the words, there is a deeply sensitive soul trying to organize a world that never slows down. If you are a Gemini and you have ever been called inconsistent when you were simply overwhelmed, this is your reminder that your complexity is not a flaw. It is depth in motion. And if you love a Gemini, understand this. They are not changing because they don't care. They are adapting because they feel more than they can explain. If this felt personal, comment Gemini below. Share this with someone who misunderstands this sign. And subscribe to continue this series, where we uncover the emotional truths each zodiac sign hides behind the stereotypes.